Welcome to the Inprint online reading series presented in association with the Inprint Margaret Root Brown reading series. I'm Rich Levy, Executive Director of Inprint, and it's my great pleasure to introduce Antonya Nelson. Tony is a faculty member of the University of Houston Creative Writing Program, where she and her husband, the novelist Robert Boswell, jointly hold the Cullen Foundation Chair in Creative Writing. She is the author of 9 books of fiction, 5 story collections, including Nothing Right and Some Fun, and the novels Talking in Bed, Nobody's Girl, and her most recent, Bound. Tony is the recipient of many honors, including the Ray Award for the short story, a Guggenheim Fellowship, and the United States Artist Simon Fellowship. The New Yorker named her one of 20 fiction writers for the new millennium. Tony is going to read a selection from Bound, her newest novel, which was a New York Times Notable Book of the Year, as have been 5 of Tony's other books. Booklist calls Antonya Nelson a writer of exhilarating wit and empathy, and describes Bound as tightly coiled, edgy, and funny. The San Francisco Chronicle writes, Nelson, witty yet sympathetic, articulates our pains and troubles better than we do. Could it be that she knows us better than we know ourselves? Please welcome Antonya Nelson.
I'm going to read the first section of the novel Bound. The dog had 2 impulses. One was to stay with the car, container of civilization, and the other was to climb through the ruined window into the wild, wait with the woman, or dash toward the distant rushing water. The woman hung suspended, patiently bleeding, barefoot, all over powdered by deployed airbag dust, one palm open like a forget-me-not in her lap, the other hand raised unnaturally high, as if thrown up to respond to a question, fingertips caught in the teeth of the ripped-open moonroof. A signal chimed, tiredly announcing that a door was not latched, or a passenger was not buckled, or a light had been left on, or that some other minor human infraction had been committed. The machine was made to attend to these. Additionally, the tape player played on, a man reading aloud. In other instances, recorded sound sometimes roused the dog's interest. Animals on television or computer, the doorbell at home in Houston, but not this man's voice. This was the car's 3rd accident today. For nearly 30 years, its driver had not had an accident, not since high school. Then, in one day, 3. First, a bashed bumper at the liquor store parking lot in El Paso, she and another woman backing out directly into one another. From above, it might have looked choreographed, perfect comic symmetry. A gentle jolt, the sudden appearance of a car bumper right where there hadn't been one in the rearview mirror. Or like film footage, run in reverse. People parking, unparking. This first accident, which had produced no problems, bumpers doing their jobs, had been in Texas, the next one in New Mexico, and the 3rd in Colorado. The second accident in New Mexico was clearly the fault of the dog's owner. Headed north through a tiny town made of trailers, she had run its only shot-blasted stop sign and been clipped by a westbound pickup. Its driver jumped furious from his cab, shouting and pugnacious before she had even shifted into park. Her right taillight had been sheared off by his too big tow bar. The dog would not stop barking at the angry man. For 10 minutes, the 2 drivers had had to circle and study their vehicles, the man venting his significant frustration, which took the form of rhetorical questions concerning the whereabouts of her mind, not to mention her driving barefooted. What are you, drunk? Hungover, the woman thought, but not drunk. She shook. Her response often was to retreat to silence. This had made her a formidable adult, although she had been mistaken as sullen or dull-witted when she was young. The man finally convinced himself that he wasn't at fault, nor was his truck damaged, and he couldn't much care about an unpretty woman. The drivers left the scene of the accident without reporting it. The other cars that passed, both local and tourist gawkers, slowed but did not bother to stop. interested to know if the verbal antics would escalate into something truly entertaining, since clearly there'd been no carnage. They wanted mayhem. The dog had not ceased barking until her owner settled behind the wheel, slammed the door, blinked into the setting sun from behind sunglasses she had not removed, and turned over the engine. Then they were restored to their humming, air-conditioned peace. For miles, the woman talked to the dog as if to prove that she could, her hands trembling when she finally put in the first cassette of her borrowed book on tape. Heart of Darkness, its narrator intoned, and thus began the story. Now the dog was busy navigating a nervous figure eight between back seat and front, stepping gently past the gear shift, tightly circling the passenger seat, her tail inadvertently sweeping beneath the driver's upraised arm, near her hinged, leaking mouth, then squeezing once more over the gear shift, onto the back seat and into her metal kennel, which was intact, though upside down. There she made the motion of settling, albeit on the ceiling rather than the floor of her cage, hopeful that obedience would reinstate known order. Obeying was her first instinct. She had been performing these moves, tracing this circumscribed looping path every minute or so since the car had gone off the highway and down the cliff. She stepped from the kennel and shook in her abbreviated space, sat suddenly and awkwardly on her tail, like a bear or raccoon, and curled forward to lick at her belly, tempted once more by the sense of the flowing stream beyond the car, yet dutiful to the woman inside. Far above, on the highway from which the car had fallen, a truck downshifted, straining against its own massive weight and force, roaring gradually by. The dog had been whinnying every now and then, an uneasy chatter in her throat, but now squared her front feet on the car console and barked close to the woman's head, teeth snapping unnaturally near the pink cheek flesh, tail waving with hope, anxiety. She had eyebrows, this dog, which gave her the appearance of intelligence, as if she could read minds or understand complicated speech. The woman was in the habit of talking to her. Certain words, walk, treat, home, as well as certain tones of voice inspired a reply. The dog barked again as if to begin their usual exchange, taking the lead, and then again insistently, demanding a response, even one of anger. Then put her nose to the woman's temple, tasted the blood there, whimpered, her tail now swinging low, pendulum of shame. The man's voice, steadily reading. The other sound, the one she could more truly heed, that of the stream. She stepped gingerly over the woman, dropped to the damp, cool ground outside, stood for a moment with her nose to the air. Without its familiarities, the car evaporated from her attention, sucked into the overwhelming enormity of the rest of the world. She dashed headlong toward the water. Plunging in, she was startled by the current. She flailed and her eyes rolled, panicked and wild. She raised her neck, scrambled, and only occasionally and only momentarily found purchase on the rocks beneath. Down the stream she flew, borne on an icy journey, through a slight and shadowy canyon, her body thrown sideways around one bend, backward around another, her chest scraped lengthily over a jutting cluster of boulders in the last rapids, again and again her muzzle submerged and blasted, and then finally she was deposited into a still pool, a wide clearing where the water abruptly sprawled, stalled, where its temperature gradually rose, milder, on the banks grazing deer. The dog climbed out through tall, saturated yellow grass, through dying pussy willows and stagnant silt, and onto a large, flat red stone that still held the late afternoon warmth from the sun.